everyone. I'm Arika, your wellness advocate, workplace realist, and co-conspirator in calling out the chaos of corporate culture. Welcome back to the Corporate Culture Protest, where we don't just survive the system, we question it. Joining me again are two voices you know and are going to trust very soon. Dr. Chipo, PhD scholar in political and international studies, who unpacks how institutions hold power and limit inclusion, as well as Jenna Bayer, a counseling psychologist, a mental health advocate who shines a clinical light on emotional harm in the workplace. So today's conversation, we're going to be talking about managerial manipulation, the quiet power plays that keep people compliant, confused, and complicit. If you've ever been felt punished and praised at the same time, this one's for you. So let's start. Let's talk about the invisible strings. Hi, Jenna. Can you
Good
tell
evening.
us, hi, can you tell us what does COVID control look like in the workplace?
So, and I'm very glad we're doing this topic because this is more common than people realize. So, what it is it's actions or signals or dynamics that shape employee behavioral mindset, and it's indirect control, influence over people using implicit messages, emotional cues, and kind of environmental setups. So it's avoiding confrontation, but it's using silent treatment, power dynamics, and ambiguity basically to guide behavior. So, for example, tactics like you know, strategic silence. After employees give ideas, you create uncertainty, and then you don't get back to them, and then what ends up happening is employees then continually are trying to seek approval because they don't know. Um, Facial expressions and body language, so eye rolls and smirks and raised eyebrows and crossed arms. It kind of sends a disapproval or dominance cues without actually verbalizing criticism. Then selective recognition, which is a common one. So praising some team members in front of other colleagues while ignoring others often encourages competition and a kind of turf war. And so this can make people insecure where you start to chase recognition. Then another one that is very common is gaslighting through implication. So what happens here, Eric, is there's the subtle suggestions that your recollections of event or events are inaccurate, implying your emotions aren't valued. And this can undermine your confidence and make employees then second guess themselves.
Mhm.
Another one is inconsistent availability. So what ends up happening with managers, they're available for some and not others, sometimes hands-on, sometimes absent. And what ends up happening here, once again, is that you're keeping employees guessing all the time. And then lastly, just creating a culture of uncertainty. So sudden firing, unexplained decisions with minimal communication. Once again, keeping people on edge and reinforcing obedience. Because when you have this environment of uncertainty, people are just going to say, okay, let me be obedient in case something goes wrong. So why this works is because you kind of bypassing direct confrontation and you're making it sort of harder for employees to call it out. It's hard to legislate this. It's hard to take someone to HR with such subtle behavior. And so that's why it works. So when you
Mm.
find yourself overthinking or constantly seeking reassurance or feeling confused or just noticing a lack of transparency and fairness, these are these are your red flags to notice that something is going on.
Yeah, and Jenna, you said something. It looks like the manager is playing favorites to an extent,
Mm.
and that causes a lot of this. It's a manipulative tactic to keep people
Mm.
separated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the thing is, what these managers are looking for is for you to continually guess, or for you to continually feel uncertain, or for you or to lull you into a false sense of security. Okay, they like me, but now I hadn't heard from them. Did I do a good job? Not a bad job? Okay, I'll keep chasing affirmation.
Okay.
And the moment that happens, the moment the manager's in control, almost like they're the puppet master controlling the strings, if you know what I mean. And that's what that is the goal. The goal is control in any way or form, whether subtle, arm folding, with body language. The goal is control, and that's what they're aiming to do.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like a crazy thing, but I mean, I think, when you understand what's happening to you, then, it creates that awareness like, oh, okay, it's actually this is happening. It's not me.
Mm,
I'm trying to be controlled here. Someone's trying to control
mm.
me. I need to react
Yeah,
differently. And
correct.
and it's true that like we want approval because we're there to do a job. That's what we signed up for. So you
Yes,
want to know that that job is being done and it's being done well. So I guess,
exactly,
yeah, it makes a lot of sense that they would use that against you.
exactly. And it's this
Mhm.
continual attempt to control you. Oh, they love me. Things are going
Mm.
so well. Okay, now that I've got them, I can now control them. That's what's going on. It's just it's playing with your emotions or hooking your emotions in early on.
Mm. Yeah, Dr.
Mm.
Chipo, maybe you'd like to add on that.
There's a lot there, but thank you so much. I think maybe what I could probably add on, I keep going back to Michel Foucault's work because I sense and I feel maybe owing to my experience with his work as well, that he speaks more directly to what I sense usually happens in the workplace, right? So he talks about what he identifies as disciplinary power, right? So this is the kind of his argument is that power is not usually exercised in the way that we his understanding or conceptualization is that power is not your bottom down, right? Your bottom up or your top down kind of setup. His understanding is that power circulates, right? So any moment of interaction that happens between two or more people, there is a moment where power is produced, right? So in the workplace, then when we then talk about this and how power circulates, it would be important to look at what he labels as disciplinary power, which he says it's power that touches bodies, right? So
Yeah.
from everything Jenna has explained, right, the idea of facial expressions, gaslighting, the creation of an environment where uncertainty becomes very central in how relationships and how people behave in that space, right? It brings me back to wanting to talk about disciplinary power because it's the kind of power that creates what he then calls docile bodies, right? So for Foucault, docile bodies are individuals or is a moment when we can be molded into acting in certain ways, right? So when Jenna then talks about the uncertainty that gets created in the workplace, right? We have a moment where then as employees in the workplace, you then begin to internalize certain acts or certain ways of being or certain practices within in that work environment that get you to operate and function in certain ways that then you model your character along certain ways where you are then supposed to act in what you perceive is what is expected of you in the workplace, right? So that on its own is then important in us looking at what Foucault calls capillary power, which he says is power that touches us, that extends into the most mundane, the most taken for granted aspects of human life. So there's a lot of internalization that gets to take place and plays out. So the moment now when you understand that when you maybe air a grievance and nobody pays attention to that, you then become conditioned and you internalize aspects of behavior that make you believe that there are certain ways you're supposed to show up, certain ways you're supposed to perform your rules and your tasks within the workplace that maybe don't how can I put it, get you to rock the boat, so much, because now you begin to pick on the cues of saying, okay, if I air out these grievances about certain things, then there's a particular way that, or there's a particular response that you get. In some cases, there's no response at all. So over time, that conditions you to then maybe overlook certain things, because now you're conditioned to think that maybe you're overreacting, right? You've become too sensitive to certain aspects of what's happening in your work environment. So over time, you find that when that internalization happens, we get to moments where now what we should be questioning and what we should be fighting against in the workplace becomes taken for granted, becomes normalized to a point where you just end up saying to yourself, it is what it is. This is how things are. You get used to normalizing things that shouldn't be normalized, because over time, however everybody else is behaving around you, especially with management and everybody who occupies a position of authority and power, will then condition you to either respond or silence yourself, or the system itself, how it's structured, then ends up silencing you to a point where you just say, it is what it is, and I'm just going to accept things as they are, because there's a lot of danger that comes with you then questioning or wanting to speak up, because there are moments when you might end up landing yourself in trouble, or because you want to stand up and question certain things that everybody else doesn't want questioned. Yeah.
Wow. That creation of doubt in a person can really cripple somebody. Jenna, what do you think about that when someone is breaking down your confidence like that?
Well, what sits with me when I hear Dr. Chipo say this is how calculated this is from the manager.
Mm.
That
Wow.
it's not like this is an impulsive act from the manager. It's not like this is a spontaneous thing. This is calculated, which means it's embedded in their leadership style, and they don't see the wrongness of it, or they don't see the right from wrong in it. It's assumed in their mind that this is correct. And that's the part that scares me. Because look, I understand that leaders are human beings, that they're going to. I am never expecting leaders to be robots, that they aren't.
Of course not.
Mm. Mm.
When it's
Mm.
explained this way, and the moment it sounds premeditated or calculated, that's the part that scares me, because that speaks
Mm.
to motives and intentions. And the intention
Mm.
is not to uplift you for genuine reasons, but maybe to initially uplift you and then ultimately lull you into a false sense of security. And then once you're in, then control you. And to
Mm.
me, that's a scary thought. Yeah.
That is scary, actually. It really is. So, let's talk about rewards, punishments, and the nice guy manager. So, we want to find out, why do so many employees feel torn between loyalty and self-protection?
Yeah.
Jenna.
Mm.
What happens is the reason for, in terms of some of the things that happen, they get torn because, let's take unpredictable feedback, like I was talking earlier, or the
Mm.
bad communication.
Yeah.
The reason they get torn is because inherently people, okay,
Hmm.
so praise will be there, and then praise may suddenly vanish, only to be replaced by coldness and harsh criticism or neglect, if employee fails to meet expectations. The problem with this is that this inconsistency keeps employees seeking validation. And so they start to
Mm.
become torn, because I arrived and things were so great and I was enjoying it. And suddenly it's, what's going on? What happened to the manager that I had 3 months ago? What's going on? And
Mm.
it's, again, it's this false validity, um, where the motive rather is control. Even love bombing and excessive praise, where you arrive and they say, we believe in you and we look forward to this. It creates this sort of
Mm.
sense of obligation and emotional bonding, because, oh, they've been so good to me, I'm now in.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and so it creates a loyalty and heightened expectations.
mm,
However, that can only last so long. And then the last one, obviously, with this so-called nice manager is the emotional blackmail,
mm,
where manipulators will use guilt. So after all I've done for you, or threats and ultimatums, if you don't take this on, it'll look bad for you. So what happens by doing that is you then fear losing approval or reputational or future opportunities. Um, and because the initial sort of obligation when you started was born from kindness and yeah, welcome and we look forward to working with you. So now it makes you obliged to keep almost like you're indebted to them. And so
mm,
the ultimate aim, Arika, the ultimate aim of all of this is to paralyze your resistance and
mm,
confuse you because it's
mm,
I'm hooking you in and
mm,
now you're trapped.
mm, mm,
Wow.
And now if you stand up for yourself, then it's hang on, I was so nice to you. How can you be like this? That's what they do. So it's playing on your
mm,
attitude, playing on guilt
mm,
trips. That's the goal, is to control you and paralyze your resistance. And
mm,
that's yeah,
Yeah. And the employee still wants to please, so they're going to stay loyal to their job, their manager, their company, and forget
yeah,
about protecting their own mental health. Or maybe just
correct.
putting it in the back seat and saying, "Oh, I'll deal with that later," or maybe it's not how I see it. Maybe
And the
yeah.
reason they may not protect their mental health, or the reason they may not look inward, is because they've been sent a message early on from the company that love is conditional on doing something, or praise is
yeah,
conditional.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
now they may not seek help for their mental health because they might think, well, I don't deserve it unless I do something. You see what I'm saying?
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
And that's what can happen. And
mm,
that can lead to the anxiety and the stress and
mm,
even ultimately exhaustion.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm.
Wow.
And maybe to add on to that, so you find employees now are stuck on an emotional roller coaster because one moment everything is up, everyone is happy, everything is perfect. The next thing you get the down times when everything is just not working according to what you were hoping and anticipating, like you're saying, the love bombing itself, right? You find
Mm.
also the rewards and punishment system sometimes takes a public spectacle. You have a moment where somebody is probably called out in front of the whole crowd and is reprimanded in everybody's presence. That on its own creates a very serious moment of a power dynamic that can silence individuals from speaking out later. Because imagine it becomes, so to speak, a metaphorical public flogging that happens in front of everybody. So instead
Yeah.
of there being a separate meeting somewhere else where people talk about things, they would want to do it in front of everybody to send out a message at the same time to say, if you dare stand up or speak out for yourself in front of everybody, this is what happens to you. So there's also a lot of even being ostracized while activities are happening at the workplace. You find that if then you become the one who wants to stand up and call out and question some things, you might get moments where now you're excluded from activities, you're excluded from doing certain things, all because you have spoken up the previous time. So now you end up finding things from third parties and everybody else that such and such is going on, or this and this is happening, or somebody else has been allocated certain or specific courses that you thought or you assumed you were the fit candidate to take those courses, if I can put it that way, in academia. So you find that there is that idea then of the public shaming, the public being made a public spectacle in front of everybody. And the last thing anybody wants to carry or absorb is the shame that comes from being um, called out or made a
Yeah.
public spectacle in front of everybody. If there's one thing that's powerful enough to get you to be silent and not get you to speak or stand up for yourself, is a moment where you public shaming happens, and
Yeah.
that cuts deep. For me personally, that would cut deep, because imagine being called out in front of everybody, in some cases over something that is even petty, that you would assume is not even worth paying so much attention, but it gets blown out of proportion, and suddenly it's an anthill that just becomes a whole mountain that erupts and gets out of place, out of control. So it's those tactics, like you're saying, Jenna, that it's all premeditated. There's a certain system. Sometimes it's probably not even written. There isn't a written code of conduct, but things just happen that are very systematic and structured in a way that you can see that it's not something that is just a random moment. It's something that is done in a very methodical way that shows that there's a pattern to it that's been repeated and perfected over time, that sometimes you find as employees you can't beat the system because it's already been perfected over a long period of time. And that for me gets everything to just blow out of proportion and becomes very crazy, because
Yeah.
how do you beat a system that's been perfected over maybe, let's say, a minimum of what, a decade or so? Then you
Yeah.
suddenly come into the picture trying to shake things up in such a space. Chances are you will not survive, you will not win, and things will just, yeah, escalate and blow out of proportion in your face before you can even blink.
I
Yeah.
feel like if people are aware of what's going on, and maybe if they stand together and they, ask for change, maybe it will happen. But it's when people are internalizing all of this, it feels like a lonely space to be in. It's just happening to you at that point. You don't realize it's happening to everybody, and this is the way it works.
Yeah.
So,
And just
yeah.
to finalize on Dr. Chipo's point, it doesn't
Hmm.
start with the public humiliation, with the shouting. It starts
Mm,
with the love bombing, and then it's a softening up, and then
mm,
it's
mm,
manipulation, and then only then it happens later on. So you get sucked
mm,
in, and then that happens later on. That happens.
mm.
So let's move on a little bit. I
Yeah.
know we can go on forever, but
Mhm,
let's move towards talking about empowerment and compliance. When does leadership become manipulation, and how do we spot the difference? Jenna?
So again, this is a process. One thing I can say to you from this episode is how systematic this is. So again,
mm,
what happens with this is that it starts with initial empowerment. And it starts with, because that initial empowerment kind of signals trust and opportunity. So
mm,
you're probably thinking, oh, there's opportunities for my growth, and the manager trusts me and they've shown faith in me early on. Great. So now you internalize these expectations, but what may happen then is you may internalize these expectations as pressure. And
Oh,
so what might start initially as encouragement can become perfectionism.
mm,
So, you see what I mean? So then you
yes.
kind of shift from support to surveillance. And
mm,
this initial supportive tone that you trusted shifts to subtle threats, i.e., if you make a mistake, oh, we expected you to deliver. I put so much faith in
mm,
you.
mm.
So the message gets repackaged to don't let us reject hiring you, you
Ah,
know?
Mm,
yes.
And so
mm,
the consequences are can be fear of failure and routine second guessing, and ultimately, Erica, without a doubt, burnout risk. Burnout risk.
Yeah.
mm, mm,
Because that's exhausting. Because again, it's
mm,
that false sense of security.
mm,
Um, and the word that sticks out is disingenuous leadership. And it's
Oh,
subtle and it's exhausting.
mm,
Um,
mm,
that can take its toll for sure. Yeah.
mm,
oh,
mm.
100%. Dr. Chipo, do you have something to add?
Maybe also just to add on, maybe there's also that creation of that false sense of security, right? There's that
Yes.
false sense of, no, we are a very open company, we have an open door policy. If you have any issues, report and we'll attend to it, and we will not tolerate any moments of racism, sexism, and homophobic acts, and on paper the policies look amazing, but the
Yeah.
practice, yeah, go south, because what's then said in the policies, what the institution promises and claims to be, and what's happening on the ground when those moments where sexism and racism and homophobia raise their ugly head happen, nobody's attending to those things. Nobody on a practical level is paying enough attention to say, listen, this is what's happened here. Can we address this, this, and that? You find in most cases, stuff is swept under the carpet, right? Nobody addresses. You might report and say, this is what's going on. But that lack of paying attention to following the proper protocol and channel to say, okay, what just happened here? What is this employee complaining about? And how best do we rectify and resolve this moment that has created hostility and discomfort for them in the workplace? Nobody is doing that. So on paper, everything looks perfect. Everything looks fantastic. It's all talk, but nobody is walking the walk. But it's just, we do this, we are this, we represent this, we stand for this.
We are family here.
This we will not tolerate this and this and this. But on the ground, it's a whole circus. It's everything that we don't do, that is we happening on a daily basis. And for me, I think that also then creates challenges for you in the workplace, because what's being said in policy is not translating on the ground. So how do we reconcile the two? How do we then get to a place where, when I air my grievances that are very much bordering or that are coming across as being very much racially aligned or very much coming as very racist in nature, if nobody addresses that, then where do we go? How do I then get a sense of security or get a sense of being home in the institution if such things are not being addressed? Because these are the issues that pop up and crop up every time in our everyday interactions. And if then attention is not paid to those things, then definitely there is going to be a continuation or a perpetuation of a culture that creates more hostility for certain individuals, for particular groups or for particular genders that are not being addressed. So that false sense of security is gone. And so how do we get to a place where we reconcile what's in policy and the practicals that are happening on the ground? Because it's one thing to have a perfect policy, but if that policy does not translate to everybody's lived experience in the institution, then this is where everything just goes south.
And
It's quite unfortunate.
even to watch for the policy when they say what they stand for as an organization. And what I'm talking there specifically is flowery language that gets used. We are progressive, diverse, we do this, we are open-minded, very savvy with words and language. But then when you go beyond that, actually it isn't. So it's all a kind of a rouge to suck you in and make it sound exciting and that you'll have a role to play. Like I said earlier, it's a rouge to get you in. Yeah.
To make you feel secure, to make you relax.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, guys, I mean, this is amazing stuff. We're going to wrap it up today. If your job makes you feel like you owe it your silence in exchange for survival, that's not loyalty, it's manipulation. And if your inclusion only exists in the newsletter or the photo shoot, that's not belonging, it's branding. I want to thank you, Jenna and Dr. Chippo, for helping us name the mind games and emotional labor and power moves that keep workplaces running on control and not care. Next week, we're going to talk about empathy deficit disorder, when your company just doesn't care. If you've ever been met with a blank stare while your world is falling apart, join us as we unpack the emotional void in leadership. Guys, remember, until next time, protect your peace, question the culture, and protest with purpose. Take care. Bye.
A young man in deep waters he swims till he becomes a man. It's a journey that's the greatest for him, and that's how he lives. When he drew his first in the ends of earth, and so that's and the story lives in they whisper tales. Clouds forming together, feel the change in the weather, and your world is born. Then the spirit ascends, and he carries the weight, and be never the same. It's been long awaited, now it's time to get it, and no force can end it. Snap juicy begins, and I'm at it again. Hand wrapped to the pen, so mad to sand. It's a wonderful blend, unraveling pain. When I open the page to my life in a day. See the rise I speak, operate in me. Open words and see what's going on within. When you older